Welcome to the debate. Imagine a siege, right, where the attacking army, they don't bring a massive battering ram to break down your defensive wall.
Right. That would be too standard.
Exactly. Instead, they bring this volatile chemical compound that reacts violently with the very stone of your fortress. So suddenly, the thicker you built that wall, the larger the shrapnel field when it detonates inward.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Your primary defense literally becomes the exact mechanism of your destruction.
Yes.
You're terrified to even raise your shield because your shield is the very thing that triggers the explosion.
It completely inverts the paradigm of safety, doesn't it? We are so conditioned to think of defense as this linear progression. More armor, a wider parry, thicker steel. But when a weapon actively punishes the act of defending, it breaks the combatant's mind before it even touches their body.
And that inversion of combat logic is exactly where we are heading today. But, it is a stark departure from the kind of warfare we were just looking at in our last discussion.
Oh, for sure.
We unpacked Iolite, debating whether his actions made him a villain or a victim of systemic familial neglect. And we analyzed that chilling 20-year grooming plan he executed by planting Malamar in the past.
The sheer patience of that plan still haunts me, I have to say. Because Malamar didn't use any time manipulation.
Right, not at all.
Zeryl is the only one actually breaking the temporal rules. Malamar just sat there, aging forward normally, day by day, for 2 decades, waiting to spring a trap. It's a terrifying display of psychological endurance.
Absolutely terrifying.
But, contrasting Iolite with the material for today, it highlights this massive running thread in Gentrics' first book. Beneath all the geopolitical conflict tearing apart Picodesh, this narrative continually boils down to being a story about brothers.
It really does, which brings us to the complete opposite end of the tactical spectrum. Today, we are moving from decades of patient grooming to, instant, volatile, explosive impulsiveness.
Yeah, we are.
We are looking at another set of brothers working as enforcers for Aeon Pax, Crater Steve, and more specifically, the tactical nightmare that is his brother, Fusemaster.
And that brings us right to the core of our disagreement today. When we look at Fusemaster's signature weapon, this concussive gunpowder-coated staff, are we looking at a brilliant, unparalleled design? Or are we just looking at a fragile gimmick that never actually got tested?
I think you know where I stand.
Oh, I know, but I couldn't disagree more with the praise this weapon gets. You're lauding a gimmick. The guy dies 5 minutes after he shows up on the page, and he does it fighting half-dead opponents. I think we are praising an untested, flawed prototype rather than a proven masterpiece.
Well, I am going on the record right now. This is the smartest, most psychologically devastating weapon design in the entire book, period. It explicitly weaponizes a fighter's fundamental instinct to block, turning their own honed defense into an immediate death sentence.
Sure, in theory, but, we have to judge a weapon by its execution on the page, not the theoretical blueprint in the armorer's head.
Okay, let's look at that execution then. You have to understand the baseline rules of engagement in Gentrics' universe to appreciate the sheer brilliance of what Fusemaster engineered.
Go on.
Swordsmen like Zeryl, they are trained by masters like Kenshin to parry, to flow, and to harmonize with the elemental arts. Their entire martial philosophy is built on kinetic redirection.
Right, the fluid dynamics of the wind and all that.
Exactly. When a strike comes in, you meet it with your steel, you catch the momentum, and you deflect it outward. Think of Zeryl' swordsplay like a masterful game of tennis. He's used to returning every serve with fluid grace, perfectly angling his blade to redirect the force.
Okay, I follow the analogy.
So Fusemaster essentially swapped the tennis ball for a hand grenade with a contact fuse. He coats a long steel staff in a highly volatile gunpowder. The mechanics are brutally simple. If a defender's steel touches that staff, the friction of the block triggers a localized, concussive detonation right in their face.
It's definitely brutal.
You can have the best backhand in the world, but if you swing, you die. He doesn't have to be your technique. He engineered a tool that makes your perfect technique fatal.
Wait, hold on though. If it's just a massive friction-triggered explosion every time the weapons clash, how does Fusemaster not blow his own hands off? A concussive blast doesn't choose sides.
Ah, but that is where the structural genius comes in. It isn't just a stick of dynamite. It is a meticulously engineered martial art. How does he survive his own blasts? He uses a highly grounded, low center of gravity stance that essentially turns his own body into a shock absorber.
Which is an insane application of physics, I'll give you that.
It really is. He dynamically angles the staff at the exact moment of impact, so the concussive wave propagates entirely outward, away from his center of mass. He uses his own physical mass as a grounding wire for the kinetic shock. It's physics combined with raw brute strength.
Look, I will grant you that the physical mechanics of his stance are impressive, but you are still avoiding the glaring problem with this so-called masterpiece. Let's look at who he actually fights in that forest.
Okay, let's look at them.
You claim this weapon completely breaks a master swordsman's technique, but he doesn't test it against a master swordsman at peak capacity. He goes up against Zeryl, who has been running a desperate infiltration mission and is completely exhausted.
Zeryl is still one of the most lethal combatants in Pecodish. Exhausted or not. I mean, the guy is a machine.
But he isn't fighting alone, and this is the crux of my argument. Fuse Master is also fighting Shane Ngo. And we need to be explicitly clear about Shane Ngo's biological condition during the sequence, because it completely undermines the idea that Fuse Master achieves some grand tactical victory.
You're talking about the severed bond.
Yes, Shane Ngo isn't just tired. He is undergoing a rapid, violent biological collapse.
Right, because his Earth Elemental gem was separated from his axe during the ambush.
With Shane Ngo,
Yeah, it's very visceral.
it acts as a biological pressurization system for his youth. So when Fuse Master shatters that axe and severs the bond, Shane Ngo literally starts bleeding his life force into the atmosphere. The pressurization fails.
Right.
He is physically collapsing, aging into a frail old man in a matter of hours. His muscle density is vanishing, his reflexes are shot. So Fuse Master's wielding this supposedly brilliant, paradigm-shifting weapon against an exhausted teenager and a man who is actively dying of accelerated old age.
Okay, but
And yet, Fuse Master still loses. A weapon this celebrated should have survived more than one sequence. What we are looking at is a prototype that never truly got tested against a fresh, top-tier opponent.
I hear you. But I think you're completely ignoring the battlefield disruption it caused while it was active. The fact that the sequence is short doesn't negate the structural brilliance of what the weapon actually accomplishes.
I just think it's overhyped.
Look at the specific textual evidence during the duel. Zeryl is forced into an absolute tactical nightmare. He has to completely abandon his defensive swordplay. He cannot parry an expanding shockwave of fire.
Because he'd be blown up, sure.
Exactly. Kenshin's training relies on blade-to-blade contact, but Fuse Master staff forces Zeryl to completely rewrite his elemental arts combat strategy on the fly. He spends the entire fight backpedaling, terrified to even raise his sword. That level of psychological and physical battlefield disruption is the definition of tactical brilliance, regardless of Shane Ngo's biological state.
Sure, it disrupted Zeryl for about 30 seconds. But you're completely ignoring how laughably easy it was to neutralize.
It wasn't easy.
You talk about this weapon forcing a rewrite of combat strategy, but how is it ultimately defeated? Shane Ngo beats this masterpiece by just dropping a pouch of ordinary lake water on it.
It was a highly coordinated, desperate maneuver from the trees.
It was basic moisture. Come on. Shane Ngo literally drops out of the canopy and dumps water on the staff. The fuse fizzles out, the friction paste is soaked.
Well, yes, water puts out fire.
In less than 3 seconds, the most terrifying weapon in the forest is rendered into a useless piece of wet steel. Shane Ngo doesn't use some high-concept elemental art to defeat the staff. He uses a puddle. And once it's wet, he just smashes it into pieces.
I mean, it is a glaring weakness. I won't deny that.
That's what kills your argument for me. For all its complex engineering and kinetic shock absorption, it was defeated by humidity. If you design a fire-based weapon to be used in a damp, natural environment with lakes and rivers, and you don't waterproof the ignition system, you aren't a genius armorer. You're a sloppy one.
Okay, let me challenge that framing. Think of Fuse Master's weapon like a highly sophisticated, uncrackable computer virus.
Okay. I'm listening.
It is designed to completely bypass the enemy's firewall, which, in this case, is Zeonyx's physical parry. The code is flawless, the logic is sound, and it compromises the physical combat system perfectly. But the virus ultimately fails because someone walked into the server room and tripped over the power cord.
That's a fun analogy, but
Shane Ngo dropping the lake water is tripping over the power cord. It doesn't mean the virus itself wasn't a brilliant piece of engineering, you know? It just means it was vulnerable to a mundane, external physical interruption.
a weapon's brilliance must account for the environment it operates in. If you design a computer virus that is defeated by someone accidentally unplugging the machine, that is a massive design flaw. You have to build redundancies.
It's field testing.
A prototype is a proof of concept that hasn't had its glaring vulnerabilities ironed out yet. The water pouch proves this was a prototype. But honestly, the brevity of this fight sequence and the fact that Fusemaster dies so early because of a pouch of water, it points to an ultimate tragedy in the narrative that I think we really need to dig into.
Which is what?
It robs the reader of seeing his true craft.
Oh, I am so glad you brought that up because this transitions us into the massive, unseen consequence of his early death. We get so caught up in the duel itself that we forget to look at the larger logistical picture for Aeon Pax's forces.
Exactly.
As we established, Fusemaster and Crater Steve are brothers. But they aren't just two random mercenaries who happen to be related and like hitting things. Fusemaster is the armorer for the duo.
Right, he is the engineer behind their brutality.
Precisely. The text explicitly establishes that Fusemaster forged the specific gear for both of them. He didn't just build his own dynamite staff, he engineered Crater Steve's signature weapon. We are talking about the heavy cannon that Crater Steve wields.
And we should clarify the mechanics of that cannon too, because it perfectly reflects their dynamic.
Yeah, it's very different from the staff.
There are no energy beams, no plasma bolts, no refined elemental arts in this specific piece of hardware. It is a strictly kinetic weapon. It fires a heavy, solid iron cannonball meant to utterly demolish whatever it hits through sheer blunt force.
It's just devastating.
It perfectly mirrors Crater Steve's unhinged, destructive personality. He is a blunt instrument, and his brother built him a tool that maximizes that trait.
But Fusemaster is the meticulous craftsman behind that blunt instrument. So let's think about the logistical reality of what happens when Zeonx and Shane Ngo kill Fusemaster in that forest clearing. They aren't just removing a single enforcer from the board.
No, they're taking out a lot more.
They are permanently cutting off Crater Steve's supply line. They are eliminating the entire research and development division of the sibling duo.
Which is exactly why I want to openly speculate for a moment here. And I want to clearly label this as speculation, because the text explicitly states that Fusemaster dies before we can see the full extent of his work.
Go for it.
But if Fusemaster had lived, if he hadn't been taken out by a pouch of lake water, what other mechanics or materials might he have designed for his brother's cannon? We know he is an absolute master of volatile gunpowder and impact detonation.
Oh, man.
Imagine if he had the time to engineer a new type of ammunition for Crater Steve. What if he coated those solid iron cannonballs in the same friction-triggered compound he used on his own staff?
Wow. That is a terrifying thought. A cannonball that doesn't just crush a target with kinetic force, but detonates the moment it grazes a defensive shield.
Or what if he engineered a proximity fuse? By killing Fusemaster so abruptly, the narrative leaves all of that potential on the table. The brothers' dynamic is severed.
It really leaves you wondering.
He is left with the heavy hardware he currently possesses, but absolutely no one to maintain it, upgrade it, or replace the intricate firing mechanisms when they inevitably sustain damage from the recoil. What happens a month later when the cannon misfires? Crater Steve doesn't know how to fix it. The loss of the armor is a devastating logistical blow to Aeon Pax's terrestrial forces, disguised as a standard combat victory.
It really is. The protagonists don't even realize the magnitude of the supply line they just severed. And, I think that depth of engineering, the mind capable of building both a kinetic cannon and a concussive staff, is exactly why I defend the staff as a brilliant design.
You're still holding on to that, huh?
I am, because even in the absolute final moments of his life,
When the staff is soaked, broken, and completely useless as a melee weapon, Fusemaster's underlying chemical design proves to be formidable.
Ah, you're talking about the scorched earth tactic at the end.
Yes. Let's look at his final stand, because it explains the how of his raw destructive capability. He knows he has been defeated. His weapon is shattered, so out of pure, concentrated spite, he plunges the broken, highly volatile remnant of his staff deep into the earth.
It's a crazy scene.
He channels his remaining physical intent into that broken piece of steel, bypassing the need for a spark and using sheer friction and compression to ignite the remaining dry powder housed deep inside the metal casing. He creates a massive, forest-leveling bomb buried in the dirt.
Literally weaponizing his own death.
Draw on the absolute limits of the elemental arts, just to contain the blast and save the ancient timber. Think about that. Even stripped of its primary melee function, even after being soaked in water, the raw chemical potential packed inside the core of Fusemaster's design nearly wiped out the protagonists.
It was a massive blast, yes.
It is lethal down to its very last spark. That isn't a gimmick. That is a masterclass in destructive engineering.
Okay, I will concede a point to you here, because that final blast is undeniable. Despite my deep reservations about how quickly he was defeated and the fact that he was fighting severely compromised opponents like a dying Shane Ngo, no, I have to admit that the psychological brilliance of the weapon is unmatched in the book.
Right?
The sheer tactical audacity of inventing a weapon that forces an elite, highly trained swordsman to be absolutely terrified of his own muscle memory is brilliant. It breaks Kenshin's teachings completely. It really does break the mind before it breaks the body.
And in the spirit of intellectual charity, I will concede a major point to you as well. While I admire the structural theory of the weapon and the physics of how he wields it, its vulnerability to a simple pouch of lake water is a glaring, almost absurd design flaw for a field operative.
Thank you.
It really does make the staff feel remarkably like a prototype. It is a brilliant concept that desperately needed another iteration of waterproofing before being deployed into a damp forest environment in Pico Dash.
It seems we've found our common ground in the rubble of that explosion. To summarize my position, while the theoretical disruption of the weapon is fascinating, its rapid failure against basic moisture and weakened foes marks it as a flawed prototype rather than a battlefield masterpiece. If a drop-bear tactic with a water skin can disarm your ultimate weapon, you needed more time in the forge.
Fair enough. And to summarize mine, despite its tragic vulnerability to moisture, the unparalleled tactical genius of weaponizing a fighter's fundamental defensive instincts makes it the most structurally brilliant concept in the book. It forces a complete rewrite of elemental arts combat on the fly.
But where we absolutely converge is on the macro-level impact of the sequence. Fusemaster's abrupt death is far more than just the end of a fight. It leaves a massive logistical void for Aeon Pax's forces.
A huge one.
By killing the armorer, the protagonist unknowingly cut off Crater Steve's supply line, ensuring his solid iron cannon will never receive the volatile upgrades it was destined for, and permanently stunting the technological escalation of their enemies.
It really forces you to reflect on how Gentrics constructs this universe. Analyzing these fleeting, highly explosive encounters reveals so much about the deeper mechanical and familial complexities of Pico Dash. Every piece of hardware tells a story about the brothers who built and wielded it. And ultimately, we leave it to you, the listener, to decide whether the dynamite staff was a true martial masterpiece or just a spectacular gimmick.
There is always more to explore beneath the surface of this material. The deeper you dig into the mechanics, the more the foundation changes.
Which perfectly sets up our next discussion. Join us for episode 15, where we will pivot to an entirely different kind of battlefield manipulation. We have to ask the question, is Zeryl Drill and his space manipulation the single most dangerous power in the book?
We are moving from chemical explosions to the tearing of reality itself. It is going to be a heavy one.
Until then, remember the fortress. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon on the battlefield isn't the one that breaks your walls. It's the one that turns your walls against you. Thanks for joining us on The Debate.